Assessment of the current state of the Cavs.
One of the things that we really benefited from was we were in a historically bad Eastern Conference. And all through those years, we really knew the target is the Western Conference team. It's
David Griffin did not hold back when he spoke about those Cleveland years. He made it clear that during LeBron James' second run with the Cavaliers, the team understood one simple truth. The real challenge was never in the Eastern Conference. According to Griffin, the focus every single season was on whoever would come out of the Western Conference. That statement alone changes how many people look at those 8 straight finals appearances. Griffin was not a random critic. He was the general manager. He worked in the building. He sat in the meetings. He helped build the roster that won the 2016 championship. When he says the Eastern Conference was historically bad, that is not social media talk. That is someone from inside the operation describing the reality of that time. He explained that the Cavaliers often did not even take the regular season seriously. One year, they started 19-20 in their first 39 games. That is not the record of a team locked in from day one. That is the record of a team that believes it can flip a switch later because the path is clear. Griffin said the players knew nobody in the East could really beat them. Think about that mindset. Before the playoffs even began, the belief inside the building was that the final spot was almost automatic. He even used the phrase that the East was the LeBron Invitational. That is strong language. It paints a picture of a conference that felt like an event built around one superstar. Instead of multiple real threats fighting for control, it felt like one dominant force and a group of teams hoping to survive. When you look at the actual teams LeBron faced in those Eastern Conference playoff runs, the argument becomes more interesting. The Atlanta Hawks once had 4 All-Stars in a season, yet no one truly believed they were a championship-level group. The Toronto Raptors were strong in the regular season but struggled every year against Cleveland. The Boston Celtics were rebuilding for part of that stretch. The Indiana Pacers had moments but were never deep enough to fully break through. During those 8 straight finals runs from 2011 to 2018, LeBron often entered each playoff series as the clear favorite. There were dramatic games, there were tough moments, but rarely did anyone honestly predict he would lose before.
There was nobody in the East who was really going to be in the way.
Yeah. Right. The East was the LeBron Invitational for all of those years.
They're not that now.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I think people need to appreciate a little bit more is Kobe is doing what he's doing, and this Cavs team with Donovan is trying to do what they're doing.
Before the series started, that is important context. Now compare that to the Western Conference during the same era. Teams like the Golden State Warriors, the San Antonio Spurs, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Houston Rockets were stacked with talent. 50 wins in the West often meant a lower playoff seed. The competition was deep and physical. Every round felt like a battle. Griffin's comments suggest that inside the Cavaliers organization, they understood this gap. They were preparing for the West. They knew that if they handled business in the East, the real war would begin in June. That does not erase LeBron's performances. He still had to play the games. He still had to deliver in big moments. The 2016 comeback against the 73-win Warriors remains one of the most talked about finals in NBA history. Down 3-1 against a historic team, he produced huge numbers and helped Cleveland win its first championship. That achievement stands on its own. But Griffin's words add a layer to the conversation about
the LA Lakers have played the San Antonio Spurs 4 times this year. Mm-hmm. They're 1-3 in those 4 games against the Spurs. Okay, Spurs are a very good team. Forget about the record for a second. How many of those 4 games has your king, LeBron James, played in this year?
Against the San Antonio Spurs?
Yeah, against the San Antonio Spurs.
1?
1. And yesterday, the Lakers are playing the San Antonio Spurs.
Difficulty and legacy. If the Eastern Conference truly lacked strong challengers, then making 8 straight finals might not carry the same weight as doing it in a balanced or tougher environment. Critics often point to the fact that LeBron went 3-5 in those 8 straight finals. Once he reached the championship round and faced the best of the West, his record was below .50. Supporters argue that simply reaching the finals that many times shows unmatched consistency. Critics argue that losing more than winning in the finals raises questions. Griffin also compared those Cavaliers years to the current Cleveland team, led by Donovan Mitchell. He suggested that reaching the finals now would be more impressive because the Eastern Conference is stronger today. Teams like the Boston Celtics, Milwaukee Bucks, and others have real depth and star power. The path is no longer simple. Another key point Griffin mentioned was how the team's mindset changed because of the weak conference. When you believe no one can beat you before the finals, urgency can drop. Regular season games feel less serious. Losses do not carry the same pressure. That can create habits that only get tested when you face
and avoid playing good basketball teams so he's not further exposed as a pat-standing clown. What a disgrace to the NBA. The NBA gave this clown a patch that he alone wears on his jersey to commemorate his 23rd season in the NBA. And how does he repay the NBA? How does he repay us basketball fans that are dying for a high-level competitive basketball? He sits on his ass on the bench and forces his untalented son down our throats because he knows he ain't good enough to help the Lakers beat the Spurs. It is a embarrassment to professional sports.
Success in the NBA almost always requires multiple elite players. But critics focus on the conference strength during LeBron's prime years. They highlight that the West often had multiple 50-win teams, while the East sometimes struggled to produce the same depth. They argue that LeBron benefited from timing and geography. Another angle in this debate is the idea of stat padding. Some believe LeBron carefully manages his minutes in games to protect his legacy in numbers. They point to situations where he stays in games to reach milestones or sits out certain matchups. Others say this is normal for any superstar, aware of history and health. It is also important to remember that LeBron's individual production during those Eastern Conference playoff runs was often dominant. He averaged high points, rebounds, and assists. Even if the conference was weaker, performing at that level consistently is not easy. Longevity itself is rare. 8 straight finals required durability, focus, and leadership. Still, Griffin's admission shifts the tone. When someone who worked closely with LeBron confirms that the East was historically weak, it validates a long-running argument among critics. It suggests that the Cavaliers' internal confidence was not only based on LeBron's greatness, but also on the limited threats around them. Legacy debates in basketball.
In an Eastern Conference is significantly more competitive than what we had. So just making the finals will be significant. I don't think you're going to see them sweep the playoffs, by way of example.
Yeah.
We did essentially that multiple years,
yeah.
Right? Other than what Toronto did to us, and that was really the city of Toronto as much as anything else. The six goddess, as it were.
Did you ever see those memes, like, while you were the active general man, like when you guys were having...
Are emotional. Fans connect deeply to their favorite players. For some, LeBron's 8 straight finals cement him as one of the greatest ever. For others, the 3-5 finals record and the conference strength weaken that case. The comparison to Kobe Bryant often enters this discussion. Kobe spent his entire career in the Western Conference, facing deep playoff fields year after year. He won 5 championships and beat multiple 50-win teams in single playoff runs. Supporters of Kobe argue that his path was tougher. On the other hand, LeBron supporters note that he carried teams deep into the playoffs even when the roster around him was not perfect. In 2007, for example, he led a young Cavaliers team to the finals before losing to the San Antonio Spurs. That run showed his ability to elevate a roster. The truth likely sits somewhere in the middle. The Eastern Conference during much of LeBron's prime was not as strong as the West. That is supported by records, all-star results, and Griffin's own words. At the same time, dominating your conference for nearly a decade still requires greatness. What Griffin exposed was not necessarily a secret, but it was a confirmation from inside the building. The Cavaliers knew their biggest threat was always waiting in the West. That shaped how they approached seasons, that shaped their urgency, and that shapes how history may judge those 8 straight finals. In the end, LeBron James will be debated long after he retires. Some will focus on championships, some will focus on finals losses, some will focus on stats and longevity. Others will focus on conference strength and team-building decisions. David Griffin added fuel to that debate by pulling back the curtain. He showed that even inside the organization, they understood the road to the finals was smoother than it looked from the outside. Whether that changes your opinion depends on how you value context versus accomplishment. What cannot be denied is that LeBron played in an era where the balance between conferences was uneven. That is also cannot be denied that he took advantage of that reality and maximized his opportunities. History will continue to weigh those facts carefully, and that is what makes this conversation so powerful. David Griffin made it clear that during those years, the Cavaliers were not scared of anyone in the Eastern Conference. They were only thinking about whoever came out of the Western Conference. That says everything. When your own general manager admits that the playoffs before the finals didn't feel dangerous, that changes how people should look at the record. 8 straight finals sounds powerful, but if the path was smooth every year, then it wasn't the same as fighting through real battles.
Griffin explained that the team even started one season 19-20. That is not the record of a team that is locked in and focused. That is the record of a team that knows it does not need to panic. They knew that once the playoffs started, they could turn it on and still win the East. That is not fear. That is comfort. That is confidence built on weak competition. Think about that mindset. Other teams fight all season to earn home court. Other teams push for 55 or 60 wins because they know every round will be tough. But those Cavs teams did not feel that pressure. They were pacing themselves for June. That means the Eastern Conference did not demand their best effort. And when you look at the names in the East during that time, it makes sense. Derrick Rose was hurt. The Pacers were good but not deep. The Raptors had strong regular seasons but struggled in big moments. The Celtics were rebuilding or too young. There was no dynasty in the East standing in LeBron's way. There was no wall he had to break through year after year. Meanwhile, the Western Conference was stacked. Teams in the West were winning 50 games just to fight for playoff spots. The Spurs were strong. The Warriors became a powerhouse. The Thunder were dangerous. The Rockets were competitive. Every round in the West felt like a finals series. That is the difference Griffin was pointing out. When LeBron reached the finals, the level changed. That is when he faced teams that had survived real battles. And his record in those matchups was 3 wins and 5 losses during that 8-year run. That is not dominance. That is mixed results against true elite competition. This does not mean LeBron was not great. He was great. But it does mean the path to those finals was easier than many fans want to admit. Context matters. If you remove context, numbers can look bigger than they really are. Griffin also talked about how the pressure around LeBron was intense. He said that working with him meant constant pressure to win right away. That often led to trading away young players and future draft picks. It led to short-term moves instead of long-term planning. That kind of pressure can wear people down. When a general manager wins a championship and still feels drained enough to step away, that tells you something. It shows that behind the scenes, things were not always smooth. It shows that building around LeBron required heavy risk. There is also the topic of credit and blame. When the team won, LeBron got the praise. When the team lost, many fans blamed the coach or the teammates. That pattern followed him for years. It created a shield around his image. Griffin's words cracked that shield a little bit. The stat padding argument also connects to this. Critics say LeBron stays in games longer than needed to chase numbers. They say he carefully manages his image and milestones. Whether you agree or not, the perception is there. And when combined with an easier conference path, people start asking more questions. During those 8 years, how many true rivals did LeBron have in the East? Not many. There was no team that consistently pushed him to 7 games year after year. There was no equal power. It often felt like the rest of the conference was playing for second place. That is why Griffin calling it the LeBron Invitational hit so hard. That phrase paints a picture. It makes it sound like the final spot was already reserved. And coming from someone inside the organization, it carries weight. Compare that to legends who had to overcome rivals in their own conference before even thinking about the finals. Those wars built legacies. Those battles added layers to greatness. When fans debate history, they look at not just the rings, but the road to the rings. If the road is smooth, the journey feels different. If the road is full of strong opponents, every win feels heavier. LeBron's fans will say he cannot control how strong his conference was. That is true. He played who was in front of him. He did his job. But when discussing legacy, strength of competition always matters. It matters in every sport. Griffin's comments force people to re-examine those years. They do not erase the achievements. They do not erase the championship in 2016, which was historic, but they do add context to the 8 straight finals narrative. Another important point is how the All-Star Game format changed. The East versus West setup became so unbalanced that the league moved to team captains. That change reflected the talent gap. When one side keeps dominating, it shows the level difference clearly. During those years, the Western Conference felt like the real battlefield. The East felt like the waiting room before the main event. And when LeBron switched conferences later in his career, the results were different. The West did not offer the same smooth ride. Making the playoffs became harder. The path was not automatic. That shift also supports Griffin's argument. This conversation is not about hate, it's about honesty. Greatness can still exist with context, but pretending the path was equal to every other legend's path is not accurate. If LeBron had faced multiple 50-win teams every playoff run in the East, the story would be stronger. If he had gone through constant rival battles before the finals, the 8 straight appearances would look even more powerful. Instead, the reality was that many of those series felt predictable. Fans often knew the outcome before the series even started. That predictability takes away some of the drama, and drama is part of what builds legendary stories. Griffin's words brought all of this back to the surface. They reopened debates that never fully went away. They reminded people that numbers alone don't tell the whole story. In the end, history will judge LeBron with both his achievements and the environment he played in. The weak Eastern Conference is part of that environment. It cannot be ignored. The 8 straight finals will always be listed on his resume. But now, thanks to Griffin, more fans will look deeper at what those years really looked like. And that is what makes this discussion important. Not to tear someone down, but to understand the full picture. If you enjoy real basketball conversations and want more deep breakdowns like this, make sure you like this video, share it with other fans, and subscribe so you never miss the next